Everyone. Happy Monday to ya. I hope you had a great Easter, whatever that consisted for you. Uh, it was pretty cool around here. I listened to that Andrea Bocelli live, which was really a lot of fun. And hey, everyone who's joining, what's up? Andrew Carlson. I hope you are having a great one with your family there. Talking to Tommy Kendall today. He's one that, as you probably know, I mean, his iconic and the legend status of is that Chris G. Berry, a Chris G. Berry that I know, Christopher Berry. Hi, Randy. But of course, he's a legend, and I'm super excited to talk with him. Known him for a few years. Hi, everyone. And, oh, there he is. What's up with the what's up? Hi.
And look at just like that, we're in business.
Phil,
So
who would have thought?
I'm in my warehouse, and since you made a special request,
There it is. I don't know
I
why.
thought it wouldn't be right. My boy.
It would not have been right. Look at
he,
that. Look at your head's almost as large as that chicken's head.
oh,
Is it about the same size right there?
well, it's closer. He's a good bit taller than I am. Some would say my head's as big as his, but
I'm so glad that just worked out. Thank you.
well,
I honestly didn't know. I lived in Santa Monica and I saw it around there. And I don't think when I lived in Santa Monica, I had met you yet. And so I saw the chicken. And today when I was Googling a photo of you, I was like, yeah, there's no way I can't use that.
there's a lot of people, because I've owned him since 1997, and for literally probably close to 10 years, nobody knew who owned the car. And it was this big mystery. Who's the weirdo with the car? And then
But why? But why the car? Like I read something today that was like you would rather, like, you are obviously a collection of different things, and throughout your life has had a different cars, but like you wouldn't give up this one. But why? I was on my run thinking about that, TK. Actually.
well, it's funny. I guess you're wired one of two ways, and you clearly want to know why. That question never entered my mind. When I saw it, the only question that governs me is why not?
Fair. Yeah.
And
No,
so,
that's true.
I mean, literally, as soon as I saw it, I mean, the stories with this car go on and on and on and on. But the beginning was 1997, rainy day in my dad's race shop warehouse in Glendale.
Uh-huh.
I hear this noise outside. I go to the window. I look out, and sitting there in the rain, clucking, is my friend.
That bad boy.
And the first, yeah, I mean, look at that attitude. I mean,
Oh, so good. So good.
First thing I thought was, I've got to have it.
Yeah.
And fate totally conspired with me, because I flagged the girl down. Someone came out and got in it, started to drive away. I flagged her down, and she, now that I own the car, I understand it. People want to buy it, rent it, photograph it all the time.
People want to. So that's it. That came off so not exactly the way that I wanted it to. You're telling me other people want to buy this off of you.
Yeah, I mean, people leave notes on it all the time. One of them led to, I rented it a couple times for commercials. He's been in three commercials. He gets paid quite a bit more than the normal rate for cars. Most normal rate's $500. He gets $3,500 to $500.
If your pet can make a living off of it and help you, why not your chicken car?
Amen. So anyways, I flagged the girl down. I got a photo of me in front of the car. I hope that noise of my neighbor grinding isn't too loud. But
okay, I have construction upstairs, so
you do.
You might go both ways.
And never heard from her ever again. Never heard from the owner ever again. But I sent a picture to Auto Week magazine. They ran it on their back page with a note from me. Long story short, several months later, someone called Auto Week and said that car is in an impound yard in Santa Monica, even though I saw it in Glendale. I lived on 14th Street in Santa Monica at the time.
Yeah, I know exactly. Right, I lived right down the way from there.
The impound yard was on 14th Street. I was racing in Phoenix, the Trans Am. I think it was the second or third race of the year. I flew home a day early. I was supposed to stay for the truck race, but once I got that voicemail, I flew home and went there and wanted to see the car, and they wouldn't let me. I said, I just want to see the car. They're like, this is jail for cars. You can't just come in.
That's wild.
And then they said, but if no one claims it, it's being auctioned in a lien sale on Tuesday. So be here at 10 a.m. with cash. And so I had offered the girl driving it $3,500 because it was worth zero, basically.
It just had the head on top. It just had the head.
The head was priceless. The car was rusted. This is actually the second chassis it's been on.
Oh, really? Okay, I want to hear about that too.
Yeah, that's another story. And so anyways, so I offered $3,500, got no response. So I said, I'm not going to let this opportunity pass by. Totally. On the Monday, I went to the bank and I got 10 grand in cash out. And I went to the impound auction and I bought it for $895.
Best $895 you ever spent.
Like beyond.
You have made
beyond.
I mean, if a percentage of how much you've made off of that, that'd be pretty high. That's an investment. That's when a car is an investment right there.
I had the conversation with my dad because like after about a year, he's like, okay, it's funny, but you're not really keeping that car. And I said, actually, Dad, I am. I said, I love it. And I said, I'm going to make money on this car. Mark my words. He's like, right. So when I rented it, and it was a result of there being a note, you probably saw it when it was parked on Lincoln because it lived on Lincoln for a long time.
You know what? It probably was when it was on Lincoln. Yeah.
And so there was notes, and I usually just kind of, whatever. I didn't respond. Finally, there's a knock on my door one day, and this guy goes, I know you've ignored all of our requests, but I am prepared to offer you $3,500 for a half day of shooting. And I'm like, bingo.
Ding, ding.
And so I called my dad. I'm like, Dad, that $895 just turned into $3,500.
That's making an ROI on that one.
That's what I said. I said, how are your investments doing?
Right.
And he's like, not that well, but I've got a lot more money invested than you.
At that point, fine. All right, cool.
Yeah.
Cool talk.
Another fun story at that same place. And it brings joy. That's the why for me. The why not was it just makes me laugh. It makes everyone laugh. I've had homeless people pushing carts with all their possessions in it, break into massive grins and wave.
Isn't that wild? And so, that's what it's really all about. I mean, truly, the joy that whether it be a car of daily drivers that you might have or something like that, that's what the industry really is all about, is kind of creating that joy in some capacity.
It's what life's about. I mean, you want to get heavy about it. But
I want to get heavy. I have another question for you coming up then. I'll talk to you about joy. I'm happy to. But I want to talk about the chicken first.
Well, a famous story. But so this one little kid, I never met the kid, but every morning he would drive by on the way to school and he would stick his head out the window and he would scream at the top of his lungs, chicken car, chicken car. Every day I would just hear him driving by. And then so one day I'm coming out of the apartment. This was an apartment on Lincoln. And there was a car in the driveway, which I didn't, lots of people live there, so I didn't think anything of it. But when you're someplace you're not supposed to be, you think everybody knows you're not supposed to be there.
Right.
And so the window rolls down and this lady says, I'm so sorry. I'll only be here a second. My daughter makes me come every day to visit the car.
Wow.
And I said, knock yourself out. I said, if you want to take a picture, you really can't hurt them. So I let kids climb up on it. I said, you can climb on it, take photos. It was Helen Hunt.
No way.
With her daughter.
What
this is
story.
When her daughter was in a car seat, and now she's in it. So it crosses all social classes, levels of fame, etc.
You know what? I had a rooster story growing up. So I'm from Indiana, and this is Helen Hunt's kids will probably remember your car because my grandma and grandpa lived in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and at the exit on 65 going from Indianapolis to Columbia City, you would turn and there was this like truly a dump of a restaurant truck stop thing that was on the side of the road. But for whatever reason, they had a rooster sitting out front, like literally the same head and face. I texted my mom to try and see if we could find the picture of us kids with the rooster.
Yeah.
And that was our landmark every time. Whoever could spot the rooster first won. And we brought that up during last week on a Skype with the family. Remember that time that with blah, 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 because someone else was talking about a rooster. And so to me, that's probably why that resonated with me. And I'm sure like Helen Hunt's kids and all that, the kid out the window, he'll always remember the chicken that was on the side of the road.
The Santa Monica chicken.
No, that was a joke. That was a bad dad joke, but the chicken.
Connection issues. Okay, you're back.
Yeah, that was That was a bad joke, but that was not me blanking out on my joke there. That was actually a phone call. But
Oh, it was okay.
but yeah, I mean, I think like that's what that's really all about, really.
I mean, it's a great reminder because it's easy to take life too seriously, including right now. I mean,
Right.
one of the things I used to do, it's hard for me to get out because you're not supposed to, but
Right.
it doesn't matter what my day is like, how much I'm stressing or thinking about something. When I pull him out, we go for a ride. It's a matter of minutes because people honk, they wave, they thumbs up, and you forget about
Yeah.
and it turns in. And it, like I said, even people like a homeless person with no possessions in their shopping cart. I'm like, if they can be happy, I said, what do I have to worry about? And so it's a great reminder. And so, some people don't like it. I mean, it's a minority, but some people just really want to take things seriously, and it doesn't compute. And
I was gonna say, does it affect your, not ego per se, but when you get in the driver's seat, does it make you feel different than perhaps getting in the driver's seat of, I don't know what other car you might have right now, your other daily driver?
You know, it's funny when you go out with a group of people. It's like, you know, it's like being on a party bus or whatever. It's an absolute good time. You've got to. It's an interesting. You can't be self-conscious if you're driving this.
I believe it. I believe that.
So you know, you have to be a little special, maybe, to drive.
Find a little joy, a little different way. Yeah, I was wondering because that would be something that I think some people would find not cool, right? Is getting in the driver's seat, but that's having a little fun with life, right?
Yeah, I mean, I should give you guys a little bit of tour because now the Gen 2, this is version 2.0. The original one was, like I said, it was from Ohio. It was rusted like all the way through. It actually had van running boards on it. And when you'd stop at a stop sign or something, the rust, it took me a while to figure out what the noise was. I'd hear this noise that sounded like almost like rain on a metal roof. It was the rust falling out of the doors onto the running boards. And I had a rule.
In good shape, obviously. Very good shape.
Yes. Super high quality. I had a rule in that car that for a while that you couldn't throw a Red Bull can away. And so
you had to leave it in there to add to the feel, the look, feel, vibe of it.
And when you open the door, stuff would spill out whenever you arrived at a restaurant or a hotel or something like that. So
that's the way to do it.
That car,
Ballet's loved you.
That car got totaled, parked in front of that apartment building. It was parked on the street, and this, you know, it was early days of, not early days, but you know, cell phones and texting were kind of new at that point, and this kid who had just gotten his driver's license, brand new Lexus SUV, and he was not paying attention and veered over and just nailed it head on. My guy kind of shook it off. I mean, he wasn't nearly as bad as the SUV, tore the whole right front off the SUV.
He survived, but
he was wounded.
Wow.
And
not defeated. Not defeated.
Not defeated. He could have kept going. He's like, you know, all right, put me back in.
Yeah.
But I found the exact same car, and so the car I found was way nicer. It was a 29,000 mile original mile Olds 98 in Iowa, Des Moines.
Original, and your only original one. So
including grandma covered seats. It was an old lady in Des Moines, Iowa. There's a Tiffany clock. You can't really see. There's a Tiffany clock.
There's a Tiffany clock.
Yes. So this was the Regency edition.
Wow.
And so
best, frail guy.
Nothing but the best. And so this old lady passed away and left the car, cherry car, to her grandson. My little brother was scanning eBay because he knew we needed another car, and we paid. I mean, cherry. It was a Cadillac, would have brought big money. I paid $2,000 for it. We flew there and picked it up, and the guy's like, "I don't get this," and I'm like, I was afraid to tell him in case he was like, you know, that I was going to do this to his grandma's car. But he said, "You want to?"
Yeah, perhaps not. Keep that secret to yourself.
He says, "You want to test drive it?" I'm like, "Nah." I said, "You think it'll make it to California?" He says, maybe. I said, "Okay. Well, where's the freeway?"
Where did you say he was?
Des Moines, Iowa.
Des Moines, Iowa. Okay. And
so we just pointed that baby west and drove and had a fun. Every time you take the car out, and that was even before. Well, that was. There's something about road trips. It wasn't El Gallo yet because he hadn't had the transplant.
Different kind of road trip with El Gallo as opposed to just the Regency at the Olds.
And so, you know, we did drive. My little brother and I drove him all the way across country to Talladega once. But again, we probably shouldn't spend the whole show talking about him. His head's big enough. But this,
Thank you. That made me so. I was so stoked. I mean, you know how I am with my quirky cars and like you
yep.
know my little finds, and to me that made me smile so big this morning. And it goes back to that joy. That's like really what it's all about. And my question that I had is, what is your definition of joy?
My definition. I mean, I've never thought. I mean, it's just that feeling, you know, where you, it's spontaneous. You know,
Is it spontaneous? Okay.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, you can't manufacture it. I mean, you can put yourself in situations where it happens, but it's sort of undefinable. I mean, it's your cat doing something stupid, or you know, it's just it's a state of mind, really.
Okay, so and that's, I think that's a good point to go off of, that state of mind, because I think some people are like, you wake up and you're like, okay, today I'm going to find joy in my day, and other people where they're like, oh, I have joy and I'm sitting in traffic on the 405 still. Like, what is, or some people, it could be a concert, right? And they're performing in front of thousands of people, or maybe you winning a race, and like, when what wasn't there a season where you won like 11 of the 13 events of that year? Like, is that the definition of joy? I think there's a dynamic, you know, it's such a dynamic word that has so many different tentacles to it.
Well, I mean, obviously there was a lot of joy that year, because
yeah,
I mean, you don't usually win. We won the first, that was the year I bought him. Actually, I hadn't really put two and two together. He might've been my good luck charm, but you know, racing is so hard. And I mean, even in a good year, my best year, I'd won, I think up until that year, 8 championships. And I think the most races I'd won was 6.
Wow.
And here we won 11 in a row. And so, you know, so racing's hard, and there's way more down moments than up, but it's a great way to launch into, and it applies to now. Happiness is actually totally independent of your circumstances. And I think joy somewhat too. It's basically the filter you look at determines, it's like the light is the same that's coming through the prism, and your beliefs and the way you think of things and the way you frame things is what turns it into this spectrum of light, breaks it in.
Or this way.
Yeah. And so I'm pretty sure, like the Dalai Lama is a great example. The Dalai Lama, if you've ever seen him interviewed, he giggles almost all the time. And
isn't that wild?
So, I mean, I'm pretty sure you could be really joyful in prison. I don't want to test that.
Sure. No, not today, and not any time in the near future. But yes,
independent of your circumstances. So,
well, it's interesting you should bring that up too. I'm in the middle of the Book of Joy, but it has to do with the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Tutu. And this is one of those books that, like, it's strange that, and no, I guess you mentioned the word joy, and that word's been on my heart, and it's something that I've been trying to define and dive deeper into. And I think people like you, who people would see very, very successful in your career, and you've accomplished a lot, you're in the Hall of Fame, you know, you have cool cars, you have a cool history, you feel joyful in certain moments, and you're continuing to rock on, even though you're not racing anymore. But what's that definition of joy? You know?
For me, you know, I've worked hard to dive into that, because even, I mean, to be honest, after I'd won 9 championships, 11 races in a row, it doesn't make you any happier than before if you don't change how you view things. And so it's kind of, we're going to get philosophical here, which we did last time we were together on, you know, when we were cruising. I better plug myself in here.
We did get philosophical last time too.
Let's see. Make sure I got some charge going, so I can keep going here. You know what? I'm going to sit back here so I can rest a little bit. But you've got to figure out how to be in these circumstances. It's been interesting to watch. Some people really struggle, and some people not. And you know, I told someone recently, I said, you know, it's funny. I've always said I love everything about unemployment except the pay. And that's actually, it's actually true. It'd be easy right now to focus on nothing but that, but that's all in the future. It might only be a day in the future where you're going to get evicted, but right now it's a construct. And so I have a saying, which is heaven is where you stand. And that's a reminder that if you don't make it otherwise, there's nothing wrong right now. Zero.
Right.
Even if you're injured. sick.
I think that's a really dynamic part about this time is there's guilt associated with people saying I'm at peace with what's going on. I'm not at peace with the external of my outside my world, and as I've started this every one of these shows, but this one, but we'll do it. I'd like to add something for those who are out on the front lines at the end too. But that angle that there are people who are not comfortable in their home right now. They're not comfortable in any way, shape, or form in their life, financially, personally, professionally. Emotionally, but there's guilt, I think, for people associated with this time to say, like, I'm okay that I don't have a job right now, or that I don't have income coming in, or that I'm solo and lonely, but like I'm okay because I have that like inner peace or whatever that is.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned I'm in a building. I'm happy to give you a tour. It's equal parts. It'll make people feel good because this is just a, pardon my French, shit show. It is just crap stacked to the rafters. A lot of it
make people feel good.
Well, a lot of it is really, it's cool crap, and a lot of it's just crap, and I haven't sorted it. So
what's the coolest crap you got in there?
Oh my God. I mean, I don't even know. I mean, there's some of the stuff in here. I did pull a few things out just walking around to share. Like I don't have any trophies on display. And so I dug a few of my cooler ones out that I saw. Well, here's a helmet. I've got
oh wow.
This is the last helmet I wore when I drove the Viper. You can see the Le Mans sticker.
Yeah, was that cool? I mean, it kind of felt like Viper, the Viper deal that you kind of got yourself back into. Was that like, did that feel fulfilling for you to like get back into the car?
It was interesting. It didn't turn. I knew it would take me longer to get sharp than I actually ended up having. And so the deal didn't turn out, and I knew that, and they said they knew that, but when it came time to it, the pressures of performing right now ended up being too great. I really had a good time. The way that came about, I was trying to get Brian Vickers into that car.
Oh, and really?
I took him. He was out. I think that was with the year Red Bull might have folded, and he was out of a ride. I think he had his first round of blood clots too. I think. Anyway, he's like, "There's no good rides. I'm going to sit out. I don't know. I can't feel. I don't know.
I'm losing your volume just a hair. Okay, sorry. There you go.
I might have had my. I need to have a stand like yours, but
my girlfriends, when I'm FaceTiming with them, always tell me, Kate, move your hand.
Yeah.
I always do that.
So anyways, I said, well, what do you want to do? Every NASCAR driver I've ever met wishes they could do other stuff, and they're too busy. Yeah. He said, oh, well, that's a good point. And so we were actually working on a cool program, which would have had him do Baja, Indy, Le Mans, a bunch of different stuff. Most of which didn't happen, but I took him
really being able to showcase the diversity of him as a driver.
Yeah, and so because and just take people on those journeys. He's an incredibly quick study at literally everything he does. Like everything he does, he's good at. You know, whether it's playing chess, backgammon. I always thought
he's one of those guys.
Oh my God, I thought backgammon was, I thought I get the game and the strategy, and it's the rolls. No,
it's amazing.
He will smoke you over and over and over, even when you think there's no way he's coming back from this. And I've beaten him.
Boom, he does.
But so, anyways,
so you wanted to have a program for that.
And so it's the perfect kind of deal for him. Is he would get into something quickly and see how he could get up to speed. Anyways, I took him to the New York Auto Show, introduced him. It was when the Viper program was announced, and I introduced him to all the executives, Bill Riley, those guys, and then Bill Riley called me like a couple weeks later. He said, what about you? I said, what do you mean? He says, do you want to drive? I said, me? And he's like, yeah. I said, I haven't driven in like 10 years. I haven't even thought about it in 10 years. I'm out of shape. He goes, yeah, but do you want to? I'm like, well.
You're a driver, yeah.
I said, I've always said probably the opportunity never comes because the circumstances wouldn't be right. It wouldn't be a proper program. And all those things that I said would keep me from doing it weren't present. And so I said, I'm game. And he says, everyone's testing for it. You have to come to a test. And so even Ryan Hunter-Reay had to test for his seat where he got
really?
Yeah, everyone had to test. And so I went to the test. The test went well. I got the seat. I was really good to put that lap together. And I told them I'm rusty. I'm really rusty. And they're like, oh, you're obviously not that rusty. And I'm like, but I was. And so anyways, it was fun to do. And I really enjoyed it probably more than the years I drove, even though the results weren't as good, because I've I've learned a lot about some of the stuff we talked about.
Yeah.
My mood used to be 100% anchored to what was my
However,
last session or my last result.
yeah, and
And
I think a lot of we know a lot of drivers who are that way.
yeah,
No doubt about it. And which that's how they work through it. But it's a different way for people who are close to them to connect with them.
it's funny because philosophically, I haven't been able to totally put it into practice, but fear is a really good motivator, and that's what that's about. Fear of failure is
Yep.
what's fueling that.
Fear is a very good motivator. Yeah, you're right. Scary sometimes,
but it also is what makes you susceptible to pressure. So if you could ever slay the fear and become detached from the outcomes, theoretically you could reach a higher level of performance. And I think some of the younger, and that's something why youth, like when Tiger was really young, before your mind gets engaged, you're just in the flow. And
right,
so
right.
and you're not
you don't
thinking,
have the fear of what do they call say you jump out of a tree when you're a kid because you don't recognize that there's a consequence to what you're doing.
Yep. So I think theoretically, you could actually get to a higher level of performance.
Have you ever jotted this down, like potentially put this out for people to like?
Yeah.
That's insightful stuff right there.
it's in the I've got about 5 potential books in me. They'll probably never get written, just like this will never get sorted. But but it's, I've shared, with some people, Vickers again was quite curious. It's really hard for people to let go of the way their software, their operating system, because they're afraid. You go through a period where theoretically you would lose your edge because fear does push you and focus you. But I think if it's fueled by passion, you could actually get a higher level of focus, and you'd be immune to pressure in that situation.
And you still wouldn't lose that edge, which, as we know, is what makes these athletes great. The legends great is they still capitalize on what that edge is.
Well, and the skills don't go away, but you're actually not. The pressure is immune because you're not tied to the outcome. You're actually more into the activity itself. You hear about journey versus destination. Focus on the next shot, not the result. Everybody says that, but if you're totally focused on the result, it's impossible to do.
So how do you think, okay, because I come from swimming as a swimming background, and I've always said that, like, I would be a much better swimmer now. I don't have the physique, and, as a high school collegiate swimmer, like, very different body build. But the angle of that is that, like, my mental and emotional strength would be very different. And I think, to your point, it's taken me a long time to get to that level where I could say, okay, my worth isn't based on that swim per se, and I'm not going to kick myself for doing X, Y, and Z, because you're right. It's not just about that particular performance. There's something bigger happening in that moment. But I think you're right. The older you get, the more mature you get, the better athlete. So if only we could have switched our body builds at that point.
Well,
or my desire to want to be in a pool all the time. But I think there are some missed opportunities, and I think you're right at teaching youth that earlier. Like, how do we get that into youth earlier?
I think you have to focus on the activity rather than the result, and it's natural to want to be good, but if I've heard some people say, like in tennis, some coaches say they don't let them play games for years until their fundamentals are rock solid. Because if you start introducing score and you start trying to win the points, not do the fundamentals. And that's something I said to Vickers, a way to sort of keep the fear at bay. I said, when you're leading a race and it's a late race restart, your mind works on you. Even if you've dominated all day, there's someone that's been close. Sometimes they're better, sometimes they're not. And you're like, oh my God, this restart. And so I said, if you can stop yourself right there and just say, think about when you were a kid, you would have dreamed to be in this situation. You're like,
that gives me goosebumps right now. That's what a cool. Yeah.
I said, this is what it's about. This is fun. Whether you win or you don't, just battle your brains out next to this person.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to do. But would be a trick to get yourself into the enjoyment, and there's joy again, but there's joy,
and that word is such a key word across the board, from I don't know. The word is so dynamic to me, and I love it. And I love everyone has a different definition of it, and it's a word that who knew that could, like I said, have so many tentacles. But that's interesting. Yeah, it's so fear based. How do you manage your fear in a position where things are so out of your own control? And I think like that's a really as athletes, as a professional. I mean, I know you like business as well, and what that means. And there's fears involved in businessmen and making decisions and making the right decisions, right? And I don't know, super dynamic there.
Yeah, it actually. I mean, I love investing in the markets as well. In
I might pick your brain on that sometime.
Psychology. What's that?
I might pick your brain on that sometime. I have my the neatest little guide to stock market investing over here. It's what it's called. But I've been diving in deep here in this quarantine, so maybe I pick your brain on that a little bit too at some point.
I'm happy to share. It's emotion's a big part of the markets. You know, you hear it. You know, fear and greed really comes into play at both extremes.
Right.
And so it is similar. And you know, I'm trying to learn more about short-term trading because there really is. But emotions really affect you in the daily stuff.
And that's what they say, right? Try to remove the emotions when you're, you know, investing in certain levels.
Yeah. I mean, you need to have something objective. You need to understand the underpinnings of it. And there's so many different approaches and a lot of different ones work. So that's another thing with investing is you got to decide what's your time frame? What type of investor are you? There's Warren Buffett, who's Mr. Value. And there's some people that are total momentum. There's some that are a combination, you know. And so, you know, people always ask me, I don't like giving tips. I like to talk about approaches.
Sure.
Because
strategy.
You can't cherry pick this and that, and, you know, so.
Right. No, that makes a whole lot of sense. I know, first and foremost, I saw Jared Deanna pop in. We had a drink a couple of days ago or weeks ago. I don't know how many, whatever day, week we are in quarantine. My neighbor Brian's in there. I know people are popping in saying, hey, thanks everyone who's joining us. A buddy of mine, Jim Smith, had said, TK, if there was another car you could drive at this point in time, you know, where would you go racing? What would you want to be racing still, if anything?
Boy, I mean, for me, the enjoyment part of it, it was funny because Trans Am was a stepping stone for me. I was trying to get to Indy cars or Formula One when I was real young.
Was that your goal? That was your goal?
That was my original goal. I had one of those, you know, those little plastic label makers where you punch out the numbers by squeeze. I had one of those on my mirror from when I was a kid, and it said 1990 World Champion.
Really?
And I looked at that, and I won the Trans Am Championship in 1990. I'm like,
close.
I fell a little short, but
close.
Bad. But
nah, you should have. That's amazing.
But when I circled back, and I ended up spending after my accident, which you know, kind of altered my trajectory, I really found a home there, and I loved it. I mean, the cars were really fat, and they're really sexy, fun, great mix of fast and safe, and relatively safe. And so Trans Am is about it. I like sprint races. Being tall, it was really hard for me to share a seat with someone.
Yeah.
So the endurance stuff I liked, but it was not as much fun for me.
I haven't thought about it that way, but yeah, like if you take some of those guys who are running those endurance races, Ryan Hunter-Reay and Graham and you know, a handful of those guys who are tall. That is a part of that I forgot when you're putting together a team that you need people of equal height. And
the reality is, I mean, if you're a big guy, being comfortable in a shared seat is relative. You're never going to be really comfortable. So, and that's part of going, you know, to really get 100% out of a vehicle, you need to be in there right. And so anyway, so I like this. So Trans Am for me, 100-mile sprints, single driver, really sexy, powerful car that was fun. Obviously I had a lot of success there, but they were probably related. I liked it and it led to it. So, I mean, an old F1 car, I did a Zoom happy hour with Jimmy Vasser and Serbia the other night. And we were talking about old F1 cars and vintage cars. And we all agreed that none of us are brave enough to race those knowing what we know now.
Right, of course.
But I'd like to drive one for like 2 or 3 laps and hear it, you know. Where
are those driven right now? Are you able to find them?
I mean, they race them, you know, they follow some of the series around. There's a vintage F1 group. They're beyond sketchy to race them hard. But,
sketchy's not even a word to describe what that is. I mean, I do love though Mid-Ohio watching the vintage cars around Mid Ohio or even around Indy. There's some of the vintage racing that happened in June. I don't know what about this year, but there's there's such I don't know imaginary. You can daydream so much with those vintage cars. You can just put yourself in those shoes of what that life would be like. What a difference of a life that is then than it is now.
There's actually that right there. That's the nose of my Trans Am Championship car from 1990. And I own. There's two cars, chassis. I actually own one of the cars. It's in Michigan at Dan Binks's place, but I haven't gotten that out. I haven't driven my car, that one, the chassis I own, since St. Petersburg, 1990.
Really?
So it would be fun to get it out for some of the vintage stuff, and it's on the list. The sponsor, unfortunately, is unreliable. Namely, he's not rich enough, and so
fingers pointing anywhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that happens. It happens, and I think that's part of motorsport in general, right? Is diving into those deep, very deep pockets somewhere, just finding a penny in there, and you're like, all right, we're good.
I did run my RX-7 that I started my career, and I also own that car. I ran it at Monterey last year. I got a lot of help from Mazda, actually, John Doonan, to get it together, and Dan Binks, who was my crew chief on that car.
Okay. And I didn't realize, and that's a tie-in from the shop over in Michigan. Okay.
Yep. And he was my crew chief then and for my whole career. Anyways, he prepped it, and we went out there, and it took a year longer than I had hoped. And he'd call me, and he finds stuff that you can't find. He says, "Hey, I found one of those PBS dog ring gearboxes." I'm like, "Oh my God, awesome! How much?" He's like, $7,500. I'm like, "Ooh."
How about that $895 of a chicken car?
Yeah, I'm like, maybe we should wait for the next one. He says, "There won't be a next one. You got it." I said, "Oh, okay." And so, I've said this a zillion times. I said, I feel like an a-hole because I never had to pay for anything. Yeah. And it was always put new tires on it. I want, I'll put stickers on.
How is that? I'd love to dive into that because I actually just this morning was having a conversation with somebody else about the idea of athletes after being athletes and the life that these athletes, male, female, have to set them up for. And it goes back to the definition of oneself is not their job. There's something, bigger, deeper. But some of these habits that are formed when that's the way you are, create a version of a person, like you're saying, of I'm given this stuff, so why on earth am I digging into my own pocket? How does someone find that balance? I mean, that shift is hard.
Well, some people struggle. I mean, I retired at age 30, and your 30s are usually your most productive years, and so I wanted to get okay with not driving, so I slayed that dragon. But you see some guys that are like Bill Arberlin, he's still producing well in his 50s, and but at some point they'll say he won't leave on his own. They're gonna have to throw him out, And there's no right or wrong way to do it, but I mean, not being there's different seasons, and so you either adapt or you don't, and there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's a lot more enjoyable if you can figure out how to let it go and embrace the next part. But
it goes back to fear and insecurity and what are you worth, and I mean, we have this in TV too, like that angle of like there will be a time when you're not the flavor of the month or the whatever it is, and you got to find that value that you bring a different way for sure. I think it's really interesting in athletes. Dude, you were 30 when you were retired. You had what a career that you had up to your 30s.
Yeah,
That's so impressive.
I got started early. It's funny because everyone's so young now, but it was really a different era. A young Cup rookie was late 20s. Like Earnhardt was a rookie at 29. It was just really hard to get. Part of it was you couldn't race anything until you were 18. Like the Sports Car Club of America, any of that stuff. You couldn't race a car.
From a legality issues.
Yeah, and now you can literally drive cars when you're 12.
I mean, some of the ARCA drivers we got are young right now.
So that was part of it, and another part was just without the simulation, without the data, experience was way more important too.
Yeah.
To get fast. And so anyways, I was fortunate. My dad was racing as a hobby. Right. And so I got a late start in karts, but I got an early start in cars. So I I won my first IMSA championship when I was 19, and I got a lucky break and made the most of it. And then it dominoed, and I won. I had my accident when I was 24, and that took about a year out of me. But then when I got back going again, I picked up almost where I left off, and had won with Ford. I won 4 championships in 5 years, and retired after my best season in '97.
Yeah, isn't that wild? It's
Yeah.
one of those things that, and you look at people who have had those accidents, or Robert Wickens, who's making those comebacks, and those people, like, you kind of trailblaze in that way, I think, for a lot of people to say, like, hey, I can still do something. Hey, you can still work beyond this. And there are people, racing is gnarly in that way, for sure.
On our talk show that we did on Sunday, just last night, I guess, Sunday night, we had Ron Fellows on, and I delved into, I said, everyone sees you as Ron Fellows, the guy that's won, the only road racer that's won in every NASCAR category, Busch, trucks, and Cup, or whatever they're called now, Xfinity. Anyway,
all the names.
Multiple this, Corvette wins, etc. I said, but you struggled like every racer. I mean, and so talk about, and it's just the perseverance of racers. It's literally failure not an option. It's like
resilient being it's unbelievable. Yeah,
failure not an option. A friend of mine who's great with quotes and so forth, he applied it to something differently, but he said, I think it was Churchill said, when you're going through hell, keep going. So that's a good advice to everyone right now.
You've had some good liners here today. Heaven is where we stand. Wait, what is that one?
Heaven is where you stand. So,
Heaven is where you stand. Yeah. If you're going through hell,
keep going. And that's not mine. That one's Hemingway, or no, Churchill. And so, but and a lot of people applied, like, to my accident. I wasn't in a wheelchair like Wickens, but I was in a wheelchair because both legs were shattered, so I couldn't walk. And everybody says, "Oh my gosh, you were that's so impressive." I said, what was my choice? I said, it's not like football. I couldn't punt on 4th down. I mean, it's like you just go.
How much did you wallow in your own stuff? I mean, how long did it take you to let go of what happened?
That's a very interesting question, because I actually didn't process it fully until I retired, to be honest.
I believe it. Yeah.
And one of the things that made me good at racing is I could compartmentalize.
Yeah.
We all can. I could do it to a degree that was actually not healthy, but it was effective. And so I literally spent no time looking backwards on that. And so eventually I had to process it, because there's resentment that I had carried for a long time and so forth. But at the time I was just like, what do I have to do? What do I have to do? And so it was just, and so that helped me just head down and just do what it took. And which was good, because it was a long road, and the progress in that kind of deal is slow. It's not as slow as Robert. I mean, I've been, like everyone, inspired by how he's approached it, and you get goosebumps every time you see one of his videos.
Isn't it unbelievable?
Yeah.
What tenacity! Talk about resilience. That's a man who's showing up and doing it.
Yeah, and there was, I can't remember another rookie that had that kind of impact. And so, I mean, it's equal parts impressive, but also there's tremendous loss there, and the end of the story is not written yet. So I would bank on him getting back in a car and competing and winning would be my bet if I could.
That also gives me chills from just that. Again, I think there's so much. I remember back in 2000, this is a long story short, in 2010, before digital was digital, I had talked to IndyCar about doing in the passenger seat, which is like, at that time, it was like, let's get behind the scenes of these drivers. Let's get them, let's get their personalities out there. I shot it with a flip vid, so I didn't even have a screen to it. But like the first video of this, and like I said, in 2010, this is so far that Twitter came out in like 2008. This is like how new school this was. We were talking about the athleticism of race car drivers, and I went to a performance center, and because at that time, especially too, even into the 2000s, I don't think people really gathered, because there were overweight race car drivers, and there are people who weren't fit, and people are drinking and smoking and all those things that kind of don't really associate with a healthy lifestyle. But I think in the recent years, especially with the development of social media, there has been such an increase of respect for the athleticism of what driving is all about.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Even like Tony Stewart's the greatest example. I mean, even when he was carrying extra pounds,
Mm-hmm.
like tenacious and fit not fit, but
Mm-hmm.
totally. I mean, he was as strong at the end of the races as he it needed to be. I
Like,
mean,
was that a mental? Was that just like just sheer the way he was able to compartmentalize?
a lot of it has to do with his skill was so refined and so sharp, and so that's ultimately what matters.
Yeah.
Where fitness comes in is how much does that degrade for you when you're fatigued, and everyone degrades a
Mm-hmm.
little, but if you can maintain focus, and some people can do it even when they're fatigued, and some people can't do it all when they get a tiny bit fatigued, so that's part practice. But it's safe to say anyone would be better almost if they're exactly the same and they're more fit. So that kind of goes without saying, but it is an interesting thing. And you put someone in a car and they like, oh my God, I'm worn out after one lap. I can't. How do you
Yeah.
do it over and over? And it's like everything. Same thing. If you could be an MMA fighter.
Yeah. And
And
by whatever round.
you try to keep up with a mom with three kids, and that guy can't do it.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
part of
We
it
used to
is,
talk about football players trying to swim. Totally different level of fitness.
yeah. I mean, it's safe to say that the good racers are really efficient with their energy,
Yeah.
and so they're using very little energy to do it. Even
That's an
whereas,
interesting point. And I like the way that has been said because I think it's yeah, well, race for drivers, all the race for drivers I've ever been around, the word efficiency is very important to them. I don't know if that word resonates with you as well. But
you, you
the
want me to
word
break it down for you? A lot of them, at least a lot of us, it's rooted in laziness. You're trying to figure out the easiest way to do something. And that's ultimately
fair
what
point.
racing is, an efficiency contest, whether it's on the car side or whatever. And so with me, it was like, how can I get through school and get good enough grades to keep my parents off my back without working any harder than I have to? And
I believe it. I can see how that overlaps with some of the conversations that I've had.
yeah. Now, once the fire gets lit on something you want to do, the same kind of thinking is just looking for the easy way and looking for efficiency are exactly the same thing. Mm-hmm. You're looking for it's because it's more efficient use of allocation and use of resources.
Right.
And so it's something that I've always applied to racing as a counter argument to people that say it's stupid in this era of green to be racing. And I said it's actually the opposite. I said most of the gains in internal combustion engines efficiency are because of racing. It's why tires are so much safer. It's why, because now it's efficiency that's pointed in the direction of specific performance rather than in the direction of minimal fuel usage or something like that. But efficiency is efficiency. And it's the most efficient use of resources. And that's not just the fuel to power the car, that's wear, that's manpower, that's computing power, that's all that stuff.
Interesting. So then what's your take? I mean, obviously, hearing what you say about, comparing that to where we are with green and driving in the future of what that looks like for our world, what's your take on it? Because I know that some of the conversations that I've had recently is we want to keep driving fun. We want to keep driving fun. But of course, like from a safety and an earthly viewpoint, what is your take on the future of what automotive and motorsports is really all about?
Well, the positive gains will be market driven, I think, because, and it's funny, this was how many years ago now? This was probably over 10 years ago. I was at the New York Auto Show and I was at the AMG stand. I was hosting an event and this guy who'd been there before, he comes up, he says, it's over. It's over. I said, what do you mean? He goes, these cars, because gas was like $5 a gallon.
Yeah.
Goes, they're never going to make these anymore. And I said, unless everybody like you and me wakes up tomorrow and decides we don't like to drive anymore.
Yeah.
I said, that's not happening. I said, it might cause a shift where 80% of the people say, I have no interest in that and I want the cheapest way from A to B. and we might have to pay more for it, but some people might decide that they don't need 500 horsepower to get their groceries. He goes, I do. I said, well, then I think
you'll be part of that.
Someone will sell you that car. It might be more
small
expensive.
Percentage,
but since that time, and I couldn't have predicted this, but I kind of hinted at it. I said, you know, the creativity, and once people started, it used to be all top down. We need to do this, and it was regulation based. But once there became a real demand for it, and people got interested in it, like all the fastest cars now are hybrids. The P1, the 918, the LaFerrari, so forth. So I think now that there's a real demand, the market will work like it does. And some people say, I think it's pure electric. I think it's hybrid. I think it's fuel cell. I think it's lighter. I think it's more aerodynamic. I think, you know, and there'll be
all the reasoning that someone will follow along or do whatever they might do. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, go back through the 100 years of the car, you know, there were certain things that were driven by regulation, but some were just like when people wanted seat belts, they're like, oh my God, those are safer. Then all of a sudden they're better. And then airbags. And then,
well, and that is what is super cool about our industry as a whole. And I would say this about automotive in general, whether it be motorsport or classic cars or new cars or whatever, is opinions arise, right? And so it's a place where people get to share their personality or share their opinion and basically live it, right? And however they've determined, I want this particular car for these various reasons, and now I get to go out and show that that's what my belief is. And I think that is really fascinating about our industry. And I think as we see the shift of what that is, I think it will be interesting to see what the beliefs are with a lot of people, because I think it'll show.
Well, actually, I just remembered this is supposed to be a drink with, right?
And yeah, it's okay. I was going to ask, but I figured you were making your own decision one way or the other.
I'm going to go over. I actually haven't been drinking for most of this. I did have some champagne after our show last night, but I'm going to take you to I had this fridge made and striped by a famous guy that studied under Von Dutch back in the day. Wow. I had this made 25 years ago, and it's still around.
Does it still keep things cool?
Yes, it does. So I've got one Budweiser in my shop.
One singular Budweiser. That's good. It's good.
Yes. And
thank you for pulling that singular one out here for this drink with.
So, yeah, I mean, it was such a great conversation. How's that backdrop for my Budweiser?
Yeah, hey, cheers.
Hey, America.
Yeah, there you go.
So,
that's very America right there. Mm-hmm.
Yes. I actually found over there again, it's just every time I come here, it's like a barn find, but it's my own barn. And I forget that it's mine. But they made Bud bottles a couple years ago that said America on them. Do you remember that?
I don't know that I remember that, but I can believe it.
And I just saw one when I was rummaging for trophies and stuff before we came on. I saw I have a Bud bottle that says America on it. I've got one of everything in here.
You are living that bottle right now, just so you know. You are you are living with that flag, with your chicken, with the Budweiser. I'm telling you what, you have the life right there.
I get grief. I do get some grief for I really love. I'm not a beer aficionado at all, and I actually just love the crispness of Bud. But whenever there's a couple things that I do that people get me grief for, a lot of things, but two of them I have ironclad defenses. One, with my feet, I wear Crocs sometimes.
Oh, you're a Croc wearer.
I wear Crocs, and people give me endless grief. And all I need to do is say, if you're going to hate on Crocs, you got to hate on Dan Gurney.
And no, you can't do that. So.
And then that ends that conversation. And then
quickly.
On the Budweiser, I said that two of my heroes and friends that are now both deceased, but drank Budweiser. One was Paul Newman, had a sterling silver pull tab that he wore on a chain, and he drank mostly Budweiser.
No way.
And whenever I was with Dale Sr., he also drank Budweiser. So
okay, well, I would say then cheers. Well, then cheers to, you just mentioned three really solid individuals and one little.
I was going to say, hate on my Crocs and my Bud, but you're hating on those guys too. So.
And I don't think there's many people out in the motorsports, automotive, or likely world alike who could hate on any three of those in any capacity. Gosh, that Paul Newman movie, just so you know, Instagram does have a thing where within an hour, I've been told it shuts it off. I haven't made it there yet, but just so you know, in case we do lose you in the next minutes. Okay. But that Paul Newman movie, remember when that came out? Was that in 2015?
The Adam Carolla one. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a dynamic.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it made me miss him. They did a great job with that. Adam and Nick,
Right.
or not Nick, Nate at Chassis Media.
Yeah.
He was one of the guys that you have on a pedestal that when you meet him, they don't disappoint you. And I was fortunate that he and I won the 24 Hours of Daytona together in '95, and so I miss him. He was a cool cat.
Yeah. Do you support by the Newman's Own or with the camps? I still buy Newman's Own.
100%.
Salad dressing buyer.
I do. And before we get cut off, I need to cheers you, because not just this, but all the stuff you've done. You're a hustler. You got a great way about you. People love to watch you, and kudos to you for making things happen for yourself.
Thank you.
And being a bright light in our world. So,
well, I appreciate that. But honestly, it's like it's our world, it's our industry, and as long as we can still have fun with it. And again, you can't take it too seriously if you can drive around in a chicken car and it brings you joy for the various reasons. And that's the same. I mean, people give me a hard time about, even in our world, like I'll pick just today, I went for a run this morning and saw this Volkswagen bus with racks on it. And I posted it. And I'm like, that to me is so cool. Other people would be like, why would that bus have racks on it? But that's what makes it fun. And if you don't have that joy and you don't get a chance to tell those stories, then I don't know.
True story.
It makes it that much more enjoyable.
I just reminded, I have a photo of Paul Newman and I sitting on the front of this chicken car.
See if it's good enough for Paul Newman, guys.
And then one of them I have with not me in it, with him just flipping the bird of Paul Newman and so and that's basically there's a saying. I'll give you one final parting saying. What you think of me is none of my business. So it's a way to ignore other people's criticisms and so forth. So,
was that a Paul Newman?
It was not, but him saying this is almost a pictorial representation of that.
Just that. Yeah. I was gonna say, were there any other icons? I mean, I still feel like I feel like our catch up can continue. Are there any other icons that maybe you'd like to have a drink with, who are living or not? And also, is there anything else you want to accomplish? Obviously, you got the twerk show. You've obviously done the TV life after racing. Is there anything else that you have your sights on?
I mean, that's one thing. I have so many things that interest me. And so when one thing closes, I don't spend a whole lot of time, if one door closes. So, I mean, I would like to, on the racing, I would like to do a little vintage racing, a couple of years kind of thing. I do have some ideas, actually. I want to get back to actually creating a little space to work on cars. I've never restored a car myself, so I think my wife has her first car, which is a VW Beetle.
Will you give her a hug from me too?
I will do that.
We've been met at the Peterson Museum, I believe, years ago now. But
so I would like to. She's not watching, so she won't know this. I want to restore her VW Beetle for her.
Wow.
Which might take a while, but that's a car sort of technology level I could probably swing with a little help.
I think so.
Too much trouble on.
Yeah, you know people who know people.
I do know people. There would definitely be some phoning a friend going on.
Yeah.
People I'd like to have a beer with. A guy that it's fun with social media. I've stayed in contact with, but Mark Martin was a teammate of mine, and I haven't hooked up with him in person in a long time. I'm fortunate. I live near Oriole Servia, who is one of the great all-time dudes.
Jackie, by the way, said love TK on my post today.
Did
They're
she?
Sweethearts. Yeah, she did. Oriole is a guy that I've just always loved his demeanor.
He's pretty pure. He's a super good dude, and a talented guy. I mean, he's come close to even winning the Indy 500. He'd like to have a couple more shots at it. So,
I believe it. I believe it.
Yeah, endless. I mean, I like, and then non-icons. That's one of the things. I'll talk to anyone. And so at the races, I love meeting people that I've never met before and sharing stories. And we all come from the same place. I never lost the feeling of what it was like being a kid, dreaming of having a career in racing or getting to work on them or be around them. And part of me, you can get jaded in a little way, but I've never fully lost connection with that. And so so that way, whatever happens it sounds good. Just going to Carbon Coffee is is a great.
Right? By the way, if ever you two ever want to go to Cars and Coffee, I was telling somebody recently, somebody else on one with a drink with, who was that? Um, it was David Freiberger. That I was like, any Cars and Coffee, anything like that, like, shoot, especially nowadays, once things open up, and if racing hasn't started again, I mean, I should be home on weekends until all the events start to tumble on top of one another. And I'd be so down to go. It's been a while since I've been to one.
Well, his ears perked up.
Hey, I will drive that thing proudly. I will get behind the wheel. A quick follow-up to that chat with TK. I just wanted to say thank you for everybody who joined. I know that we didn't get a chance to get through all the questions that were there. That was such a joy to chat with TK, hear some of those stories. And I know that we didn't get a chance to say this at the very beginning, but I just want to say thank you to everyone who is out in the front lines right now, who are still working long hours, hard shifts, are not in the comfort of their own home. And I just want to say thank you to everyone out there. What you're doing is appreciated, and we really value what you're doing. I don't know that TK and I are going to continue joining again, but you can always check back on that live show for the next 24 hours. That was a lot of fun. He had some great one-liners. Heaven is where you stand. If you're going through hell, keep going. And something about people not caring about what people think. So, hey guys, this is so great. Thank you guys. Make sure you check out that interview with TK. A joy to be with him. Thanks everybody.